Welcome to the Dragon Slayer podcast by Frontier Credit Union. I am Steven. With me, as always, is Bailey. Today's guests, we have David and Bailey from SignPro. Welcome, guys.
Thanks
For
good to
having
be
us.
here.
It's great to have you. Okay, well, we've got a pretty good relationship. We've done a lot of work together over particularly the last year, like a whole lot. We went through, as people know, a big rebrand, and you guys did all of our signage, I think, every last bit of it. So that was like 12 branches. And actually, you guys did this sign that's sitting behind me right here,
It's
which
sweet.
is awesome,
Thank
by
you.
the way. And so we know you're great, right? We know that you guys are really, really good at what you do. I want to go back in time just a little bit. Tell me how SignPro began.
Okay.
Where'd you guys come from?
So it's funny when you talked about the project that we did with you guys with your changeover, your rebranding. I was watching a few of these last night, these Dragon Slayer podcasts, and I saw the old sign with East Idaho, and I had totally forgotten that was the name of your business before.
Yeah.
Like, that's how quickly that branding works.
Yeah. It feels like a distant
Yeah.
dream. Like it never existed. It existed for since 1962, I think, that name.
Yeah.
And it feels like it never existed
And
now.
what a great change as
Yeah.
far as, Frontier. It's awesome.
It's been really, really good, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
in fact, I'll even tell you, one of the very first times I got to visualize the Frontier brand was sitting with you, Bailey. You showed me a mock-up of one of the signs, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And because we had it in our heads, and we had it on pieces of paper and stuff, but to see it mocked up on a real building, I was like, this is so cool. And in fact, I don't know if you know this or not, but I took a video of you showing us that, and I sent it to our CEO while I was sitting there in your office, and he was just like, amazing, right? It was
Nice.
such an
Nice.
exciting moment in time.
Nice.
You guys are such a big part about bringing that to life too.
Oh, we
It was cool.
appreciate
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
opportunity to be a part of it. Really,
It was great.
that was a big project for us.
Yeah.
So,
Us too. I don't know how much of the background story you guys know about how we developed that brand. Probably not a lot, because you guys came in at the end, right? At the very end.
right.
We started talking about it. So let's see, we did the rebrand last August. We put it out live, so almost a year ago. And so it's been basically 3 years since we started talking about doing it, planning it, putting it together. Whew. It was so much. It was so much. For a year, it's almost the only thing I did.
Wow.
It was a
Well,
long time.
It turned
Yeah.
out awesome.
It was cool. Yeah, it's really cool. Okay, I cut you off.
No,
let's
it's okay.
go.
It's
Let's
okay.
go back. Yeah.
So my career with SignPro started shortly after SignPro first started. So, and SignPro is, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory behind SignPro. SignPro is not a franchise. It's what they called a licensee, where you would buy a location, but there was no ongoing support
Interesting.
and so there's several SignPros around Montana, Idaho, a couple in Utah.
So it's like buying a pre-made business, basically.
Yeah, so what they did is, and this was right when vinyl was first coming out in the sign business. So everything else was hand painted.
That's such a wild thing.
So
to think
vinyl
about.
was coming out, and
what year is this, if you don't mind?
so this is I started in 93.
Okay.
So this was probably 92 when they first opened it here.
We were still painting by
Wow.
hand in 90.
In the late
90s.
80s, early 90s. Yeah, there were a lot of hand painters. And so
I thought you were going to tell me it was 1962.
Yeah,
that was
right.
happening. Yeah. Golly.
So, but the unique part of SignPro was, so you would buy a location and they would set you up with the equipment and do some
Right.
training, but there were no ongoing
then they just
royalties
left. Yeah.
or training or anything like that. And so there's several SignPros, but none of them are affiliated.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But the caveat was that you had to own a media company to buy the SignPro little licensee.
What do you mean by media?
So
company?
either newspaper or
so
radio
actual traditional media.
or TV. Yeah. And so the SignPro that
That's so
was
weird.
here was owned by a radio station.
Why would that be a prerequisite of that?
It was pretty genius. So
You could get a bunch of free advertising? Is that what it was?
yeah,
like?
that was part of it. So the radio station was always doing promotions. And this is back before, your satellite radio type stuff. And so everybody advertised on the radio station.
It was one of the only places to do it.
Yeah. And it was super effective. But so they would always do promotions. So they needed banners and they had their vans that needed graphics on them and stuff like that. So it fit really well because the radio station had a built-in sales staff that was working with businesses.
Yeah. Oh, that is genius.
That is smart.
And so
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So with the sign end of it, not only did the radio station get everything for cost, the sign business got free advertising and free marketing to all these businesses through the salespeople.
Yeah, and a built-in sales staff.
So they'd be talking to them about radio, and they'd say, "I just noticed you don't have a sign. Here's our card for our sign company." So I started right after that first opened, and we were tiny. There were like 3 of us.
What did you do when you first started?
So it was kind of funny when I was interviewed. I had been out of the country for a couple of years and had come back, and I was looking for a summer job because I was going to go back to college, and I couldn't find anything. And it was funny because the job I left before said, "Man, 2 years when you get back, we have your job. Come back, we'll hire you anytime." You know. So I came back, and they were like, "Oh yeah, man, we're not hiring." Right now,
turns out.
And at the time, it's like, what? And I
had a girl do that to me. Same kind of deal. Yeah, makes sense.
So, and I applied at a bunch of different places, and it seemed like everyone was like, "Oh, dude, you're hired for sure. Like, we can actually read your handwriting, and you got all the math correct and all this stuff." And then I would never hear from them, and it was so strange. And so for about 2 weeks, I was looking for a job, and I finally settled. I literally got a job at Subway.
Yeah.
Right.
Sandwich artist.
And it was like the best of the fast food. You know, I can do that. I just had to get a job. And
you don't want to be slumming it up around McDonald's.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Subway,
McDonald's is great. But anyway, so I had a buddy. He was actually my brother's friend, and he's a very prominent businessman here in Idaho Falls. And he said to me, he goes, "Hey, I got a friend that he's running this little sign shop. He needs some help." And so my first thought was, well, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to paint, you know? And so I went in. And he was talking about weeding and masking and layout and production. And I was like, okay. I had no clue what he was talking about. And it cracked me up because he said, out of the blue, he goes, "How many square feet in a 4x8? And I said, 32. He's like, "All right, you're hired." Like, okay, you know. So
you just do like basic multiplication. He's like, this is a home run here.
Yeah. So I started, and it was right then. Within a week, I knew that was what I wanted to do.
Really? What was it that you were like, I love this?
It was creative. It was building things. And honestly, it was the first job that, you know, everybody had crappy jobs when they were in high school, summer job type things.
Subway.
And Subway. Yeah. Sure. And it was so funny because I got that job. I got that job the day after I started at Subway. And I gave Subway 2 weeks notice. And so I would go and work.
They were like training you during your final 2 weeks. That's hilarious.
So I'd leave at lunch from SignPro and go work the rush at Subway. And then after work, I'd go work the night there. Because I didn't, like, my parents were like, you have to give notice, you know? Sure. And so whatever. But as a kid, or with some of the kind of tough labor jobs that you have growing up, you can't wait to get off. You're just watching the clock, and it looks like it's going backwards, right? This was the first job I ever had where it was like you had a purpose. You were trying to get stuff done, and you were kind of racing the clock. And so it was interesting, and it was cool, and it was something different every day. And it was the time just went speeding by.
Yeah.
And I learned early on that I had a knack for it. And so at that time, I told myself, I'm going to go as far as I can with SignPro, or I'm going to own my own company. And so I'll do everything I can. I'm going to learn as much as I can while I work for them because I'm getting paid. And that's what I did. So that was 93. And in 99, I left. I'd really hit the glass ceiling there. It was kind of a weird deal. It was like the radio station, which was awesome. This was like their little side thing, you know?
Yeah,
and I had big plans. I wanted it to grow. I wanted to do all this stuff, and they didn't. They wanted to keep it little.
Yeah.
And so I left and opened my own company, which was called SignWorks, and actually competed against SignPro for 5 years. And they approached me to buy them out.
Oh, to buy them out.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so, and we grew, like I was free to do everything we wanted to do, and we grew really quickly. And we actually had equaled, and SignPro was big because of, and the advertising was amazing.
Well, yeah, of course it would be.
You couldn't listen to any of the big stations for 5 minutes without hearing an ad.
So why would they want you to buy them out? What was the motivation?
So they were struggling.
Okay.
And the owners of the radio station, they weren't sign guys.
Right. Yeah.
And so they didn't know how to fix what wasn't working. So they were busy, but they weren't making any money. Matter of fact, they were losing money.
That stinks. Yeah.
So we were doing the same in sales as they were, but we were making a good profit.
Yeah.
So they approached me, and we struck up a deal, and we bought them out. And I wasn't really interested in any of their equipment or anything. It was just the name, because it has a great ring to it.
Yeah.
And the top of mind awareness.
Yeah. Did you get the advertising deal with it?
We didn't get the advertising deal, but we got everything that happened before.
Yeah.
So I think it was the Post Register did a top of mind awareness campaign where they sent out a big survey to everybody, and they had people say, name a tire store. Name a grocery store, name this and that. And it was your first thing. And when they did sign companies,
it was SignPro.
SignPro was like 90%. SignWorks, which was my company, was like 9%. And then the rest were everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a no-brainer for us. We needed to buy the name.
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
And it was a good move for us. And
they probably didn't charge you a ton either.
It wasn't,
because they weren't making any money. There was
we were in a good negotiating position.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah. Not fun to sell a company that's dying, right?
No, and it's funny because I was young when I was Bailey's 26. I started my company when I was 27.
Mm-hmm. Bailey, you got a year to figure it out.
Yeah, serious ground to cover.
Yeah, it's
started competing sign company. Then you can buy your dad out one day.
And see, I learned a lot of lessons by working there. It was a great place to work, but I learned a lot of lessons and some things I wanted to do differently.
Yeah.
And one of the lessons was, man, you've got talent. You got to recognize it, and you got to keep them, and you've got to do everything you can to give them opportunity. And that was really what I was lacking, and that's why I left.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny because I was young, and sometimes I think back on the balls, man. Like seriously, like
like in your mid-20s, be like, I'm just going to start my own competing sign company. To the heck with you.
Yeah, and when they approached me, I even had the conversation where I said, "Why would I buy your business? I'm getting your clients for free.
Yeah,
every day.
Yeah.
So, and they knew it.
Yeah.
And so we negotiated pretty good. It was a good price. It was still a lot of money, but it was a good price, and we did it and never looked back. And it's been awesome. And I still see the old owners, and they're great, and they're so super successful in the radio business. And so this little sign company was like nothing for them.
Yeah,
right?
It was just a sideshow.
Yeah. So and they recognized that I had the passion for it, and I had the drive and the vision, and they said we can just close, and we'd rather see it go to somebody that's going to do it and make it right. So yeah, it's been awesome. It's been 32 years now.
Dang, that's wild.
So, but yeah, it's funny when you first start, you don't realize the risks that you take. You just do it, man.
Sure.
It's crazy.
There's some beauty to being young.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Where you're just like, I'll just try it, right? And
absolutely.
If it blows up, then I guess I'll move on. It's interesting.
And Bailey's was born into it. He was a, and that was the other thing. He was a year old when I left, and it was having a son. When my wife and I had Bailey, it changes everything on how you look at things. And so it was time to get real and to get serious about stuff. And so I spent my first 5 years at SignPro, or 6 years there, learning every single thing I could learn, because I knew that there was a point I wouldn't have anybody to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it benefited them too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, there was a point where the bookkeeper would come to me, I'm 26 years old, and ask about, hey, how should we, charge taxes on this? And how should we, and I'm like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And it was just a mentality of just, if I can't do it, I'll figure it out, because there's going to be a point where I don't have anybody to ask.
For sure. Yeah. It's interesting. You bring up this thing about like having a kid and what that does to
Oh,
you. And you're right, it changes you. There was this earlier in my career. I was managing a sales team, and there was this one guy who's fine, right? Like he was, 90, 100% of his quota, pretty consistently. Never a star, but never bad. And I remember just like going back a few months later, and I'm like, man, he's killing it. What is going on here? And so I sat down with him, and I was like, man, it's like you turned this corner. What happened? He's like, oh, I had a baby.
Right.
And it just totally changed his level of commitment and motivation and desire to do something, and it changes people.
Yeah. Bailey has a 1.5-year-old.
Yeah.
Same. I see it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
100%.
a little bit of a difference in work ethic. And,
It does something to you, right? I've got 5 now, and I'm done. I'm not having any more, but it's weird. And everybody who works for me has heard me say this before, but it's just like your life doesn't belong to you anymore.
Right.
It belongs to this little family,
Right.
These kids. And so like, I'll go to work and kill myself because I got to do it for them.
Right. Right.
Love hiring people with children.
Right.
Just for that reason.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did Bailey end up coming in? What did that look like?
Well, I just, as my dad was running SignWorks, I'm a kid,
Yeah.
so he's coming home from work, and I'm sitting at the dinner table listening to him and my mom talk about work stuff. And I just always I've always looked up to my dad and mom. And but yeah, I went to a year of college and kind of decided that wasn't really for me. Came back.
Boring.
And, it wasn't for me. Yeah, I did that, and then decided I want to go work. So I started working on the install crew for SignPro.
And so what are you, like 19, 20, something like that at this point?
Yeah, probably 19.
Yeah.
Probably 19 at that point. And yeah, I just really liked it. And ended up getting into sales, and I just really enjoy the business. I love working with my family. I know a lot of friends that probably think that sucks and hate it, but I love it. I love coming into the shop and being able to work with my mom and dad and the rest of the staff that we have. And it's just a fun business.
Yeah.
Stressful, but it's different every single day. Everything we do is custom and super, involved, I guess.
Yeah. So Bailey really grew up in the shop.
Yeah.
And, when you're starting a business, I had a pretty good balance to where I could leave. I didn't miss many of his sporting events, but yet, my life was at the shop as far as like my life was at my family, of course, but I was there on the weekends and Bailey was in there with me. And so he saw a lot of that stuff. And like from the get-go, he had a little dirt bike that we graphicked up. He saw all that stuff, it was all custom and everything, and go-kart and the whole 9 yards. And so he was always involved with that. And so he was helping out of the shop probably when you were about 14, just kind of helping out. And then we knew that he might come on. We have Bailey and we have a daughter named Macy. And, you hope that they will, but you don't know. And it's their decision. And we want to make sure it would be their decision. But I knew how good Bailey was with people. I knew he was a salesperson.
Yeah.
And not a salesperson like, hey, what can I do to get you into the sign? But somebody that gets stuff done, organized, can communicate well.
Yeah.
From when he was little, we'd have people come up to my wife and I and say, I just had a full-blown conversation with your 4-year-old son. Like, what? Well, an intelligent conversation.
Well, we worked with Bailey. Bailey's our sales rep.
Right.
And love him. He's been amazing from day one.
Yeah. And so knowing that's where he would end up, we also knew that he needed to understand the business coming into that. So rather than bring him in as a salesperson, he started at the very bottom, weeding vinyl, masking vinyl, helping on that type of stuff. I had a brother that was our lead installer, my older brother, and Bailey worked with him on the truck, and he's really funny, and they had a great time, and they worked their butts off. But it was cool having my brother with his nephew and kind of taking him under his wing.
Yeah, that is cool.
And, it changes as an owner, your safety level goes through the roof. You're always trying to be safe and safety first, of course. But it's like when you have your son out on a truck, you better make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, But so Bailey worked with Kent, my brother, for a couple of years out on the truck. And, you know, it was funny. Picked up some things that installers do.
Or like cursing and kind of thing. Yeah.
List is long.
And it's like, oh my gosh, man. But I knew he had to learn all that.
Yeah.
Because it makes you so much better because you know what you're talking about when you're dealing with customers. And so when the time came that he went into sales, it's just been awesome. And it's crazy. Like you don't realize what kids pick up just by being around you. And I'll hear him. I got to keep it together here, but I'll hear him in his office, even when he first started in sales. And I'm like, wow, I thought I had confidence when I was that age.
At Frontier Credit Union, we're changing the future of business with our Velocity Money Market account. You can receive unbeatable returns on tiered interest rates. We have rates up to 2.02% APY. Frontier Credit Union puts local businesses first because when you do better, we all do better. Federally insured by the NCUA.
I thought I had confidence when I was that age. but everything he's saying is on point. Yeah. And it's cool. It's awesome. And like Bailey said, we love it. Like we work hard. No doubt we work hard. And we have strict deadlines. Your project had some deadlines that were insane. And I think we hit them all.
I think you did.
It was a push, but
behind on maybe a couple, but
nothing
very,
wild,
very far behind.
I remember Bailey. I remember being like, "Okay, Bailey, this is how quickly we need to do this," and he's like, "Okay." And he, what I always have appreciated about Bailey is he's always been really, really straightforward with us about the reality of our requests.
Right. Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And he's been really good about being like, "Well, yeah, that can happen, but that probably can't in that time frame." And I think we always just really trusted Bailey. I think a lot probably from that background being on the truck, right?
Right.
Because he just knows what he's talking about.
Right. Salespeople shouldn't try to BS people.
Yeah, 100%.
I
never felt like I was being sold to.
Right.
Never felt that way. Yeah.
That's been our philosophy from the start is do everything we can to make the customer happy. And we were talking about this the other day. There's 3 parts of our business that we have to keep focused on. It's customers first, but our employees, our suppliers, and the owners, the business itself. And so we can't focus just on one of those and let the other one slide. And we can't focus on 2 of these or this and that. But it's every decision that we've ever made is how are we better for the customer?
Yeah.
Will this make us faster? Will this make our signs higher quality?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a business guy. I went to a year of college, and I think I dropped out the second they were talking about anthropology class or something. And they were trying to tell me that the Neanderthals, which they...
Yeah, I don't like that they changed the name
Neanderthal.
on that. Yeah.
I remember that. And they were trying to tell us what they used for the word queen by the shape of their mouth. And I was like, I'm never going to use this. And this is okay.
Yeah. What is this phony baloney class that I'm in here? Yeah.
And we've been successful. And really it's just because we're just completely trying to make everything as good as we can for the customer, for our company, for our employees, and for our suppliers.
Yeah. So. Okay. So the obvious question here, when you retire, is Bailey taking over? What's the idea there?
I hope so. It's funny because going back to that first job I had where it seemed like time just was going so fast. Well, that's my career. So I've done it for 30 years. And I feel like I'm his age, but yet everything changes because now we're buying equipment and I'm buying equipment knowing that he's going to be using it.
Yeah.
It's a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I have, I'm in my 50s, early 50s, and it's like, really, I only have 20 years left. Like that's the mentality is not, I have 20 years left. It's, I only have 20 years left. There's a lot of stuff I got to do.
Fast, yeah.
And there's goals I have and levels we want to achieve. And it just doesn't seem like there's enough time.
Yeah.
So, but the cool thing is that Bailey, and we have a lot of other guys on our staff too, that are young and they're good. And they're starting off from where I'm leaving off. So they're not starting off like Bailey, when he started as just entering into our company, he's kind of started after hearing me discuss so much that he didn't start at nothing. He started up here. And I can see with his mindset and his goals and some of our other guys too, they can take it way farther than I can. I can get it to here, but they can take it to here. And so I'm looking forward to it. I always joke that there's a point where I'm going to be, I'll never retire because I love it.
Yeah.
But there may be a day that I come in and go, what's this machine do?
Yeah.
And it's getting to that point, really. Like I see signs that go up and I'm driving down the road and I'm like, oh, dude, that sign looks really good. I wonder who did it. Oh, that's got a SignPro logo.
Oh, you're like, I did it. How did I do it?
We did, and I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
And so
you
seeing
say,
the transition.
you say, hopefully, Bailey says nothing. What Bailey, what are you thinking about here?
Put in the time, I guess. And I don't know. I just enjoy the day to day, and I don't really have any, of course, eventually I'd like to, take it over, but
that's what we want.
Yeah.
I think every parent wants that.
Of course.
But I don't want to put any pressure. I don't want Bailey to feel like he has to do that.
Yeah.
But I think he'd be really good at it.
Yeah.
And that's really what we want. We'd love it to keep going. And whether we sell to Bailey, whether we just bring him in, there's a lot of things that we'd have to work out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's the direction that we're going for sure.
Yeah. No pressure, but you have to do it.
It's awesome. I truly love it, and it's a cool industry, and it's completely different from, I think, a lot of other trades where we're a lot of trades combined into one, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Some jobs where, we do a lot of electrical work, we crane, we do concrete,
excavation.
Yeah, I think you've done all that stuff for us.
It's cool, man. It's a lot of stuff. I enjoy it. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah, and touching back on Bailey taking over eventually, just like when we knew he was going into sales eventually, and so we did all the legwork to have him learn all of the shop stuff and install stuff. But also, we do that with him for ownership too.
Yeah, I was about to say, how do you prep somebody to be your successor?
I'll bring him in and we'll discuss some of the big decisions. Personnel is probably the hardest part.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, business decisions. We've brought him in and exposed him to that. Obviously, we're not going to just throw him into that and have him make those decisions. But having him be a part of it and seeing how the process goes is preparing him for that. So, yeah. What Bailey was talking about with the sign industry that's so interesting about it and so cool is it is literally all the trades rolled into one.
Yeah.
So in our shop, we do welding, printing, painting, metalwork, sheet metal work, electrical work for our electric signs. And then on our installs, we do excavation, we do craning, concrete, painting, more electrical work out on site. And it's funny. So that's a little bit of the challenge with our industry is that trying to find people. We can easily hire an electrician who's an expert in electrical.
But can he also do concrete?
But that's one of 20 things that we do,
Yeah.
So
for sure.
when you become a sign guy, you know a lot of stuff, man. And it's pretty cool because, and you're not an expert at it. Like, we're not expert painters, but we're pretty dang good painters. And we're not expert concrete guys. There's concrete guys that are way better than us, but we're pretty dang good about what we do.
Yeah.
But it's different every day. Every single sign we build, your signs were pretty similar because it was such a big project. But on the day-to-day stuff, every project we do is different. And so it's a challenge.
What's your guys' favorite part about what you do?
There's a lot to list, but I like working with all the clients that we have and, kind of establishing those relationships and kind of look at it more of as less of a salesperson client relationship and more of how can we help you out? What problem do you have? What problem can we solve? And I just enjoy all of it from that aspect. And then, working with our designers and then working from the designer going to the, the CAD section of things. How are we going to build this? And then taking that and explaining that to our fabricators and, seeing the ideas that they come up with for a project. And then after that's all done, okay, how are we going to install this thing? So it's a lot. It's involved, but it's very cool.
There's so much satisfaction from, we're selling concepts.
Yeah.
We're not selling this mug that's already built and you can see it and you can touch it. We're we're selling a concept, and we invested pretty heavily in a CAD system last year to show our clients an animated view of everything. Seeing the project start from an idea all the way through to an install and a completed project. And then the other thing that's really cool about the sign business is your product is meant to be seen. So you're driving down the road and you see all of these signs that you built, which is a double-edged sword because there might be something you would have done differently that you can't go back and do it. And you still have to drive past it. But it's such a difficult job, but there's so much satisfaction in seeing it done and turning out really well. So, that's my favorite part.
Yeah. Being able to drive past it and say, we worked on that or we built that. And
do you ever do that like with your spouse? Like,
I was going to say, I could probably talk for every sign guy's spouse in the industry of how annoyed they get with.
You probably say the same one every time you drive by. Yeah, remember that one? That was a good one.
Yep.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a sickness.
I mean, I get a little bit of that in what I do, but not nearly like what you guys have. And I'll be like, yeah, honey, see that advertisement? Like that's one.
Yeah,
that's my concept. And
It's
she's
awesome.
like, I know you've pointed this out a dozen times. Yeah. Okay, so I got to ask this because this is really interesting. Anytime I hear about somebody with like a family business where you have family members that work there, it introduces a level of maybe complexity to how you manage an employee when it's also like, a relative. How do you do that? What are the stickiest parts of that? And how do you navigate it?
So our last name is Whitehead.
Yeah.
And when my brother worked there, some of the other crew members came up with the phrase Whitehead privilege.
Yeah,
which I can tell you right now is BS.
Sure, of course.
Because everybody in our shop works hard. A lot of times people don't see what you do behind the scenes. I mean,
I know for me, it's, knowing that that's kind of already maybe a perceived thing, you have to, being in my shoes, you have to maybe take some extra steps to work harder, come in on weekends, stay later, go out in a sales position, go out on the truck with the guys sometimes, go out in the shop with the guys sometimes, go and...
Well, and that's the thing is I don't think anybody would say that we're not the first ones to jump in when somebody needs help with something or to cover for somebody that's not there. And we're just we're all on the same team trying to get the same goal done. And so I don't think that there's a big issue with that. I know that we all have Bailey has his office that's 2 offices down from mine, and he's always in there killing it. And I'm in my office doing my thing, and April's in her office doing her thing. And my nephew's our lead installer, and he does a really good job. I don't think any of us take advantage of anything, and all of my guys can use our equipment on the weekends if they need to. And we try to be as fair as possible.
Yeah. Is it sort of tongue in cheek, like just kind of playing around? Yeah. That would be a tricky thing to manage because you're right. You're going to have a built-in perception around that, whether it's fair or not. It's just going to happen.
Well, and the thing that's tough is that the sign business, all sign companies seem to really rely on family. And I think it's because it's such a unique business and it's not really known to people outside of your family.
Yeah.
Even people in our own family don't really know what we do.
Right.
And, but so like when a kid's coming up and they're growing up, they're thinking about being a fireman or a police officer, a doctor, or something like that. Nobody's thinking sign guy, unless you're somebody in your family's a sign guy. That's a challenge for us.
Yeah.
You were saying you had 5 kids. I have 2. I wish I'd had 10 because we could staff our shop a little bit better. So
that's like 1700s farmer mentality.
Exactly.
There, right? Like,
yeah.
You just got to have a lot of kids to work this farm. Yeah.
Totally. No, but Bailey's like one of our main guys and has done a great job and we have a good time. Like I have to pull myself in a little bit and try to rein myself in from going into his office and just joking around because it's so stressful. Like our job is very stressful with deadlines and you're trying to be creative and you're doing all this stuff and you've got to get an outlet. And so I'll come into his office, and sometimes he's like, dude, I got stuff to
I'm busy,
do, man. But we have a really good crew, and our guys come back off our installs, and at the end of the day, and everybody likes to talk war stories, and we have a good time, man. It's that's the other part I really like.
Yeah,
is
definitely
the people that we work with.
Have you ever had to like your employees that are also family members? You ever had to like professionally like discipline them on something? Be like, you can't do that. Your performance isn't up to snuff or whatever. Have you ever had that experience? I see you smiling a little.
No, not with, you know what? Honestly, my brother that worked for me was a little short-tempered. He's my older brother.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
He was also very respectful of my experience. And so he didn't come to work for me till later. He was probably 46. I was younger than him. And so he respected that. And so I could sit down and talk to him and like, no, you probably you can't throw an apple at an employee. You want to coach him,
Yeah.
But other than that, no, really, actually everybody in our family has really been star employees.
Yeah.
I mean, Bailey's a star salesman along with Andrew. Andrew's awesome too. But then of course, April does all the books and she's stellar. And Jeremy is my nephew installer and he's a stud.
He's a stud installer. Yeah, he does an excellent job.
I've never had any family members that have come up short really.
Yeah.
So
are there instances with working with other people and what is the word?
I don't know what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I totally just lost it. Your customers.
Oh,
there we go. Customers. That's the word. Where it's not a good fit for you guys. How do you handle that?
So we've been fortunate enough to be in business long enough to understand when it's a good fit and when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also realized a long time ago that we can't do every project in the area. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to focus on the projects we want. So a client like you guys come in, it's yes. I mean, we met with you guys and it's like, this is top priority. Your project last year, we had a big war board on our.
I remember
Did you
seeing
see
it.
that?
I've
And
seen
it had
it, yeah.
every location, that was awesome. Bailey spearheaded that whole thing and it was, so we love all customers. Some aren't a good fit for us.
Sure. Yeah.
Some are looking for a little crafty type project, which is great, but that's not
really your thing. Yeah.
We can do it, but that project's going to to go through our system, it's going to touch 6 people's hands. And by the time it's done, it's a $200 project for something that they're expecting a $5 thing. So we turn away a lot of that type of stuff. And there's companies out there that's what they do.
Right.
And so they're better for
You're
that.
just built to do something different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've really focused on building ourselves up to handle the bigger projects like your project. And that was a big project.
It was, yeah.
And not many companies around here could have handled that.
We're well aware. Yeah.
So, and that pushed us.
You're not the first sign company we've used. Yeah. Let's just say that.
Right. So, we do have great clients, and every once in a while you do have to say that, this isn't really a good fit.
Yeah.
And we recommend so-and-so, they're probably set up better for that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's a challenge though, because you don't want to turn anybody
Turning
away.
away work is probably my least favorite thing to do, but
Sure.
it's kind of the matter between helping on a project like your guys's with, 12, 13 locations versus, spending all the time for, a small decal with someone's name on it.
Right.
Someone's girlfriend's name.
Right.
It's,
That's good
pick and
repeat
choose.
work though, because then they come in
That's
and have
right.
that take
You're
off.
going to have to do a new name every so often.
Right.
That's a good question though. It's a great question.
So I want to go back just a little bit to kind of the early days of the business. What were some of the big struggles that you had? You mentioned like just how crazy it was that you had like the confidence to do some of that stuff. What were some of the struggles that you had, and what kind of advice would you give to somebody if they were just starting their own thing?
So I had a couple of things happen to me early, and Bailey's probably heard these stories a million times.
Captive audience right here, though. So
I've not heard them at all.
That's what I told on the way over. I said,
Bailey,
I don't know
just relax.
I don't know
Yeah.
if I have enough to talk about. And he's like, dude, seriously.
like, you don't have anything to talk about.
So early on, when I was in the sign business, I went out on an install. It was when I was an employee. I went out to install a sign, And this is back before cell phones.
Yeah.
And I went out to install this sign, and it was my boss's job. And I got out there, and where the sign needed to go, there was like a gutter that came down the wall. So we couldn't put it there. So I looked around, had to find a phone, use the business's phone, and I called my boss. And I said, hey, I'm over here. We can't put the sign up in this certain spot. Can you come over and look at this? Which I thought was a pretty
Seems reasonable.
seems
to me.
reasonable, right?
Yeah.
And he said, look, I'm in my office. I'm working on my project. I can stop, get up, go out to my pickup, drive across town, look at it, and make the call on it. Or maybe you can make the call on it, man. You're there. And I was like, that was a tough one. I was like, kick to the crotch on that, you know? And I was like, you know, in my mind, it's your project. You know, you want me to make this decision. But honestly, for me, I was like, okay, there you go. And how many times do you think I asked him anything after that?
Yeah.
Nothing. I did it myself. I figured it out. And that went along with me knowing that there's a point I'm going to have to figure everything out. So why not learn all that right now when I'm getting paid? And if I do make a mistake, I can just share some of that liability as opposed to all of it.
Right.
And so that was a tough life lesson, but it was a good one.
Yeah.
Man. And it was, I mean, we see it every day in our shop of you got to get stuff done. And if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And so that mentality, it really lends itself to what we do. Yeah. And that was a big turning point for me was just sucking it up. It was like growing up in 1 second and being, okay, why do I need help on this? Why can't I figure this out?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hated it at the time, but it was a good one. It was a good one.
It's funny. I have this one employee, and she says that I do a shrug when somebody asks me a question that I think they should figure out on their own.
Right. That's good.
Apparently. And so she calls it the Steven shrug. And she's like, don't ask the shrug questions, right? Like those aren't the good ones to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough for people to get that, but you know, sometimes you have to say, you know, what would you do?
Yeah. So you figured out that situation. Did he come back and be like, you made the wrong call here?
No, and he was cool. And he was cool. And he was very complimentary. He knew that I had a future. Yeah. And, you know, he made comments to me, and he was great. He was one of my best friends.
No, it sounds like that was like a really useful lesson.
Yeah. And, you know, he invested time in me. He was a good mentor. And I don't think he ever thought I was going to leave. But I did. It was a tough one, and we competed, and it wasn't pretty all the time.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Like you leave the biggest sign company in the area, and you start a competing sign company. Sounds like a crazy idea a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you start peeling away customers? How did you find success early on?
That's a good question. The reason why I was confident was I had a pretty good clientele built up.
Yeah.
And I knew I ran the numbers. I did a business plan. I did everything to prepare for it. I knew that if I could maintain about half of those clients, I could make it work. And we did. And we were profitable from the first month. And it cracks me up because now I look back and even though we were profitable the first month and we just grew, we've just had steady growth the whole time. We take a deposit on a sign now that we build that is more than our entire year, the first year we were open. It's crazy.
Right.
And so it's been really good that way. But I just knew, honestly, man, and I don't want to sound arrogant. I knew I could do it better.
Yeah.
I knew I could do it faster. I knew I could do it better. I knew I could design them better. And early on, one of the first times I competed against the sign company that one time I was competing against myself because I was bidding on a job that I had already bid from that. It was kind of crazy. But
don't listen to that guy. He's an idiot.
Got that job. Yeah. No, but it was one of the first times I competed against them. And I went in, and it was keep in mind, we're not competing apples to apples because you're coming up with a concept. Yeah. But my concept was more expensive than theirs. And I got the go on that. And I knew then, I was like, it's on. Yeah. It's gonna.
So I've been to your shop. There's all kinds of cool machinery and stuff. And that's about as technical as I can get on that. In the early days, how did you get your hands on all this stuff? It must be expensive.
Well, that was the cool part about when I left to open my own shop was you didn't need any of that because I took my first loan out and it was $20,000. And we had everything that the company I left
That's
had.
wild.
It was crazy. And the essentials that you needed. You needed a computer and you needed the software. You needed a vinyl cutter and a little vinyl printer. Everything else was hand tools and ladders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I don't know how you could start with a ton of capital without a ton of capital because
there's got to be $1 million worth of machines in there at least.
Yeah. And our trucks, trucks nowadays are insane. We just ordered a truck for next year that's $220,000 as opposed to the $10,000 one that we bought the first time.
Started with.
Yeah. And so, but that's the one thing that we've always tried to do to do things better and faster is we've tried to invest in equipment and
oh, it's clear. Your shop is so cool.
Thanks.
We took a tour last year sometime, and Andrew and I went down in there, and we were just like, what is this crazy stuff they got in here? It was awesome. Yeah, Andrew's saying I was the only one saying that. Yeah.
I'm glad you can appreciate it because we used to do everything by hand. So cutting out a letter, we had a jigsaw and we'd print a little template and cut it out by hand. Now we have 2 big CNC routers that just automatically cut it, and they're perfect. It's faster and it's perfect.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. So and that's really what my career has morphed into was as opposed to doing all the selling and doing all the sign stuff. Now I rely on Bailey and Andrew and Tori helps out with sales and April helps out with sales. My job's really morphed to creating a business and a company and a system that supports them to make it so that honestly, if Bailey wanted to leave and do his own thing, I hope he'd say, oh my gosh, I can't, there's no way I can do that. Right. I need all the equipment. I'd have to hire all the people, all this stuff that my dad does that I don't have to do. He can just focus on selling signs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been a change over the years, but which is kind of tough because I like selling signs and designing signs. I still kind of do that, but really it's the system that I have to focus on to make it a good seamless system that supports the sales guys.
Yeah. So let's talk about this for a minute because this is a really interesting problem that a lot of businesses face is like you're really good at the thing, whatever the thing, like making signs or whatever. What is that transition from being the guy who makes the signs to being a guy who just runs a sign business? What does that look like?
So I've seen 3 different ways it's been done. And I feel like I was fortunate enough that I went in knowing that building signs is only a small part of the business. That's the easy part. Mm-hmm. Really, that's the easy part is your product. It's the business end of it. Mm-hmm. That's the hard part, human resources.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. The accounting end of it, and I've been fortunate because April's awesome at that. So I've never had to worry about that, but, I knew it going in and I knew I wanted to go in and build a sign company, not a sign shop. I didn't want to create a job for myself. I wanted to create a company that could employ people.
Yeah. That's a really interesting distinction.
The other part of that though, is I've also seen like a business owner from a different industry buy a sign shop and not understand the sign end of it and really struggle.
Yeah.
So they might know the business end of it really well, but they don't know that sign end of it. And so they struggle.
Yeah. They can't deliver.
Yeah. And then I've seen good sign guys that don't have any business sense and struggle, even though they're really good sign guys.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty lucky to have that. And I think Bailey has that same thing and he's seen it. And I see the goals that he has and the input that he has with some of our business decisions that like, dude, it's like, it took me 20 years to figure that stuff out. Seriously. Yeah. So we're really optimistic for where we go from here.
Let's talk about where you go from here. What does the future look like? I know you've got some plans here. What else do you have in mind? Bailey, what are you going to do with it when it's yours?
At Frontier Credit Union, we offer startup loans for emerging businesses to help support you in the early stages of growth. This could be for inventory, equipment, or other operating expenses. Almost all businesses qualify. Get started today by visiting our site, frontiercreditunion.com, federally insured by the NCUA.
Bailey, what are you going to do with it when it's yours?
Well, man, I just keep growing, man. Mm-hmm. Keep growing, keep cranking out cool stuff. And we'll grow as we keep doing what we do. And, I think in a perfect world, when I'm Dave's age,
You call him Dave?
When I'm Dad's age.
I never get used to that.
When I'm my dad's age. Multiple locations, man. I want to.
It's all contingent on personnel.
Yeah, it is. It always is. Yeah.
If I could clone all of my guys, we'd have multiple locations.
Yeah.
What's your advice for finding good people?
Yeah. Let me know if you have any. We have really good guys, but it's a tough one nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's funny because within our company, there's several generations. We just had a guy retire, which is mind blowing for me that we had a guy work for us long enough to retire. He just retired. I'm not the oldest in our shop. We've got a little mid-level of our shop manager, Bailey, my nephew, our other lead installer, and our other salesperson. And they're all starting to have kids. Yeah. And it's like, dude, if we could just
everyone, 3 or 4 kids per guy, we'll be just fine.
Oh, we'll dominate. if that generation could just move up and then have them start, it would, yeah. So, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. And we love the grind. That's the other thing that I think is really important. I always relate it to like hiking. If you're trying to hike up to a waterfall, if the only thing you're going to enjoy is the waterfall, you're not going to make it. You have to enjoy the hike too. And we like the grind, and it's tough sometimes. And I have to get used to Bailey swearing. He's my son.
Shop talk here and there.
And he has to get used to shop dad, and sometimes it's inappropriate and this and that and the other. But we really love it, man. It's a grind, but it's like going to the gym. If you don't like lifting the weights, you're never going to get big, or you're never going to get fit. You have to enjoy
if you just want the
process.
Body, then you'll
never make it.
Yeah.
And so, we take it day by day and just try to build cool signs and build them fast and efficiently and high quality, and, make sure we price things right, that we're making a good enough profit to reinvest. So far, it's been awesome, and it just has flown by. And, so we try to celebrate the highs and push through all the negative stuff, but I knew that's what it was going into it. So I kind of like it. We call it, embrace the suck?
Embrace the suck. Yeah.
Embrace the suck.
Well, it's funny because at the end of the year, we'll do a company Christmas party where we, put a bunch of job photos in, and, then we'll put it on a slideshow display. Yeah. And it's funny to sit there and watch that, and like the joy that everyone gets out of, oh dude, that job sucks so much. It's in the moment, it sucks, but being able to see the finished product once it's all done, and it's rewarding.
To put it into perspective, before my wife came on, so my wife had her own career. And then when we decided to buy SignPro, she left her career and came on because it was too much. We doubled the size instantly. Yeah. And so she came on, and I remember before that, she used to say, so she worked in a really good, I think she called it ophthalmologist, eye doctor for an eye surgeon here in Idaho Falls.
Sounds good.
Excellent job for her, a career. And she had a really good position there. But one of the things that they would do is they would schedule for the doctor, and they could schedule the full year. They knew when he was going to take vacation. They knew how many patients he could see and all this stuff. And it used to drive her crazy. And she'd say, why didn't you guys get through the schedule today? And I'd go, man, you don't know. Like, the only thing that changes for you guys is if the patient doesn't show up or the doctor doesn't show up. Yeah. We're dealing with weather. We're dealing with staff, materials, shipments. Yeah.
This ain't deposit. Just is one better or two better, right? This is something else.
Yeah. Permits getting approved.
Permits. Yeah. The bane of our existence is permitting. It's really, it's chaos.
Read the third line down. It's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah. Well, anyway, then she came on, and it was like the first week, she was like, oh my gosh, dude, this is crazy. I apologize. This is crazy. So, but yeah, so we do like Bailey mentioned, we do a big Christmas party at the end of the year, and we have installers that are up in horrible weather. Probably should have called it off, and they're on top of something with taking a selfie, and it's funny because you look back and you forget how it was tough at that time, and it's just cool. You're building stuff and you're accomplishing things, and so the satisfaction is like off the charts in my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to see something that you did that's real and tangible.
And then on top of that, for me, and this is what Bailey will end up doing too, is I'm building a project, which is the company, which will never, ever be done.
Yep.
It'll never be perfected. But yet you're progressing every day, and you're trying to dial stuff in, you're trying to progress, and you're trying to move forward. And you look back, like I look back in 30 years, and like you said, like, you know, with all this equipment and stuff, I look back and remember how we used to do stuff, and we've made so much progress. It doesn't seem like it, and then you look back and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I want to ask this question, and it might be a little uncomfortable.
okay.
So we haven't always been a customer of yours.
Right.
We know a lot of the other sign companies around, like your competitors.
Right.
Why do you win against those other companies?
Well, I don't want to give you our secret.
Wow.
Well, they might be watching. No, honestly, I think that not to discount anybody else, because there's some really good sign companies, and you know, we like competing. There was a time when we bought SignPro right afterwards where there wasn't a lot of competition.
Right.
And honestly, our quality went down a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it taught me a lesson that you need competition.
Yeah.
You need to be on your toes. You need to be fighting. And every day we're fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it pushes you. But I think the advantage that we have is that our approach is a little bit different. We approach it more with a business sense. I think that we have people that have a real passion for it. Not only a passion for really making cool signs, but also being a part of a successful business. So like I have some colleagues that I meet with every month, some mentors and colleagues, and sometimes they're astonished that I let my sales guys price their own stuff. Because
they want to do it all themselves.
Well, and the natural tendency is for a salesperson, they want that job, they want that commission, so they'll lower the price to get it.
To get a deal done. Yeah.
And I've never had that issue. I've never had it. And I know part of it's been training.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, in addition to that, my two main sales guys, Bailey and Andrew, they're just as invested as I am.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the passion, the approach of, and the desire to make the customer happy. And I'm not saying that other companies don't have that. I'm sure they do.
There's a different feel at your place. Like legitimately, there's a different feeling when I work with you guys versus some of these other sign companies. And I'll name names. I'm not afraid to. But like you talk about like the passion and the desire to do like great work. That comes through just working with you guys. Like we feel it. As a customer, we feel it.
Well, we appreciate that. And, you know, honestly, the thing is that this is our American dream. But our American dream is helping other people with their American dream. You know, to the person that's starting their business. I remember starting mine, and it's a huge risk and it's a huge jump for them. And, you know, we're kind of a part of that.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's not just building a sign. We're not just taking an order from them. We're trying to think of the thing that can make them the most successful.
Yeah, the most effective sign for them to get people in their door.
Yeah, and a sign's not an expense. It's an advertisement. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard thing to train people to understand sometimes.
I've always said our best advertising space is our buildings.
Yeah, right.
Like it matters so much to get that right.
Absolutely. And last year, doing your project, you know, people would ask me, hey, what are you guys doing today? Oh, we're doing the big Frontier project. Oh, dude, we've seen your trucks everywhere. We've seen those going up. You know, it's very visible.
Yeah, it really is.
But yeah, that's really the deal is like our success totally is determined and depends on the success of our clients.
Yeah.
And we feel that and we value that.
Yeah. Okay, I got to ask this. Now that we're pretty well through that rebrand project, what was the worst part about working with us on that? What was the hardest thing that you had to do?
Well, you guys were excellent to work with.
Yeah.
No, you really were.
Seriously.
You really were.
I was just going to say, I can't think of anything.
Yeah. No, you guys.
The hardest part was we had to quickly, because keep in mind, doing your big project, our other projects didn't stop.
No, I know. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that's a little bit tricky with the sign business is you can't schedule the demand.
Right.
You may have one phone call on a Monday and you may have 50 on Tuesday.
Right.
And everybody has their deadlines. And so you can't just put people in chronological order and have somebody, that wants a banner in 6 months because we've got 6 months of fabrication. We got to figure out a way to get it done quickly. So honestly, your project, and Bailey handled it. So he may have something else to say.
Yeah, Bailey, come on, give it to us.
But I was impressed because I wasn't really involved I was more involved with keeping the other stuff going.
Yeah.
Bailey handled it with some help with our fabricators and installers for sure. Our setup guys, our CAD guy, but we increased our staff by about 50%.
Oh, wow.
In order to handle the other stuff because we wanted our top, most experienced guys on your project. So for me, that was the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a really fun project to work on, and I think probably the hardest part was the paint match.
Oh, dude, totally.
Right at the very first. Yeah, the paint match was right out the get-go. I was like, oh, man.
That paint match was impossible.
That was a tough color to match, but once we did it, it was good to go.
I forgot about that.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. I think I was the big holdup on that too, because I remember Andrea worked with you a bunch, Bailey.
Yeah.
I then would come back and be like, okay, here's the 8 versions that we think will match. And I was like, do them again. I would send it back. And was it 4 times we did that?
And the amount of signs that we were doing, it had to be perfect. I mean, we had to dial it in, but that was a challenge.
Yeah. The paint match was definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I remember.
Is it black? Is it blue? Is it bluish black? Is it blackish blue? What is this?
Seeing some green in there now.
Starting to see red.
Then you'd look at it in like different lighting, and you're like, you'd look at it like inside, and you're like, it's perfect, and you go outside, and you're like, it's all wrong, right? It's so hard.
But then you have to put it on stucco, and it looks different on
Yes.
stucco.
Right.
Every application of it looked different too. Yeah. That was.
I think the color we picked worked though. It looks good.
Yeah, we're happy with
I
it.
think it looks awesome.
Super
It
happy
looks really
with
good.
it. Yeah, that was one of the harder parts of that rebrand was figuring out that color, particularly that blue color, on like signage, on pieces of paper, on digital stuff. It was so hard to get it all right. And so we have an official color, but like there's 12 actual colors that we use for different stuff. Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was a huge team effort on that. A lot of weekends worked and a lot of overtime put in. A lot of people stepped up within our shop and to positions that they weren't, maybe necessarily in at that time, but took that step to take ownership over their section of the project. And it's a huge team effort, and it worked out great.
The bulk of all the signage, you guys did, it was like done in like a few months. It was 3 months, 4 months maybe. I remember when we were initially making like the plans, we were this is before we had actually like talked to you about the project. We thought a year, right? We thought it'd probably take a year to get them all done and finished. And it was kind of interesting because about the same time we were like, okay, we know we're going to do this, but we hadn't set a deadline for ourselves yet. And so I remember I was sitting with my boss, Dan Thurman, who's the CEO, and we were like, okay, we're going to do it. We've got it like figured out. We've got the new brand designed. We're ready to go. Dan, when do you want to do it? And it's like June, right? Like mid-June when I'm sitting with Dan talking about this. And he goes, how about August 18th? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's like in 2 months. Like, there's no way. And he's like, no, there's a way. You're going to do it. It's going to be August 18th. I was like, So I think we met with you guys like the next day. And we were like, here's what we're looking at here, guys. Yeah. You guys pulled through in such an amazing way for us too. It was like every week a new branch was like totally rebranded. It was cool. It was really cool.
Total branches we did.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 12 or
12,
15.
12.
And probably 4 custom electric signs per branch.
Yeah, 3 to 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
48, 50 signs.
It's a lot of signs.
Dang.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to think. Was Driggs wasn't part of that because we didn't have to pull that
Sure.
one down.
That was
we just
just a
had
new
to
Yeah,
add that
Driggs
one
was
in,
new branch at the time.
but new branch at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, it was a lot, and I'm glad it's over.
We're not. We could take a few more of those.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the next few branches.
We like rebrands.
Well, we have a few more coming, so you'll get to do a couple more of the new branches. But yeah, I would highly recommend. Like, if somebody's going through something similar, I would use you guys again in a heartbeat. Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
really
Yeah,
a great
we appreciate
experience for us. Yeah,
It was a challenge even just keeping the locations because we had multiple locations going on at the same time
I remember,
and just
yeah.
trying to keep everything
Yeah,
organized.
keep everything
and-
squared away per location.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but it worked, man.
Okay,
It was-
the worst permitting deal you had to do for us.
we don't have enough time, do we?
yeah,
For you
geez.
guys, we can probably talk about yours.
Yeah. Well, Driggs was tough.
Driggs was a little tough. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just took a long time.
Well,
And
yeah.
like disappeared and yeah, I remember that. That was a little tricky.
Well, and then we put the sign right in the
Oh,
easement
yeah.
for the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, that was funny, huh?
But yeah, Driggs was pretty tough. But I mean, we worked through it, and
I remember Meridian being a little tricky too.
Meridian's pretty cumbersome for
Yeah.
the permitting.
They had a lot of really specific stuff that they wanted. for
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
super
remember that.
specific, but got it all done, taken
Yeah.
care of, and good to go.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest challenge of our job is permitting.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
And some jurisdictions feel like they're on your side trying to figure out a way to do the job.
Mhm.
And there's some that just
You're fighting them.
Yeah, they don't wanna do
their
it. They don't wanna do
knee-jerk
it.
reaction is no.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. And one of the times I knew that Bailey he's legit.
Oh boy,
Which city did you make the permit lady cry?
that was stuff's got to get done, man.
Yeah.
Sun's got to get up.
I mean,
It was in
what happens is they hire people and they don't know their own sign code.
Oh, yeah.
And they're
that's
telling
clear.
you no, and they're pushing it back, and they're not looking at it.
And meanwhile, while all that's going on, I've got a list of other projects I should be working
right,
on,
of
but I'm
course.
sucked into this
Yeah.
vortex.
Yeah, you got to
of-
drive
of
to this stupid office
never-ending-
and
right.
yeah, fight with somebody about
Dude,
it.
we can consult with the client. We can design the sign. We can set it up, produce it, fabricate it, paint it, wire it, install it. We can do all of that entire project faster than they can look at the application. And then in addition to that, they really have a sense of, well, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't even be in business. And it's like, if it wasn't for you guys, we'd be twice
We'd
our
be doing
size.
way more business.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's a struggle, and some are great, and some are just tough. And yeah, I remember.
You know, that's part of it, though, and it's one of those things that sucks, but we embrace it, and
Yeah, but Bailey made one of the permit techs cry.
What did you say to her? Exactly.
Well,
Can you repeat that here? Or
yeah, it wasn't. It was a sign in Jackson.
Jackson's
and,
tough.
and
I
they're super anti sign, pretty
Yeah,
much, right?
yeah.
Everything's got to be Western looking
Yeah.
and made out of wood, which
it's crazy.
doesn't work.
It's really hard. Yeah.
And so, anyways, I mean, I'd been working with this permit tech on this for like at least 4 weeks at this point. So there's just weeks of pent up, like, what, at this point. But anyways, the sign that we wanted to permit has a logo and then company's name. And she was saying, you can only have one building sign per elevation. And I'm like, that is.
Yeah. Why don't
That is
I don't
one sign.
understand the problem? Yeah.
And she's fighting.
like your logo. You've got the flag
yeah.
and the frontier.
Yeah.
right?
Then the text.
Yeah, flag, frontier,
similar deal.
So yeah, she was saying that would have been 3 signs pretty much.
What?
And
Dang.
I finally was like,
Well, didn't she at one time say each letter was a sign?
What?
yeah, I can't remember. I think I blacked out a little bit throughout the conversation. But yeah, no, that was just had to tell her she was wrong, and she did not like to hear that. And got
Yeah.
the permit approved though. Client was happy.
Yeah.
So-
Permit got approved. She started crying. Client was happy. Dad was proud.
Well. Oh goodness, I love that.
And probably when the permit technicians see my name coming through, like, oh, dude,
Oh,
that,
not
guy,
again.
that guy's son, he's coming up through the ranks.
Oh my goodness. Okay. What last pieces of advice would you give to somebody running their own business? If you could distill down all the years into like, these are the main takeaways, what would they be?
I would say be an expert, immerse yourself. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know your product, know everything. Early on in my career, we'd get trade publications, sign magazines is what we'd call them. And I'd read them cover to cover when they came in. And I just wanted to learn everything. I never wanted a client to say something that I didn't know. And so you gotta jump into the deep end and immerse yourself 100%, because you can't fake your way through it.
Right.
And then in addition to that, you've got to approach it as a business. And like what we talked about today is, if you're not profitable, you're not doing your clients any favors. We have to charge enough so that we'll still be in business to service those clients, right? It's capitalism.
Yeah.
We can't charge too much. It's got to be an honest, fair price, but we also have to make money, and we're not going to be ashamed of that.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Yeah.
And then in addition to that is just, embracing the day to day. Really. You'll get to the goal if you enjoy the journey to the goal. If you don't, you'll never make it. And quite frankly, for me, I don't even know if I did my entire career and did what we do every day, and at the end of my career, I didn't, Bailey didn't want to take over the business, or I didn't sell it for millions of dollars or whatever, I'd still be happy. I still had a good career,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you still liked it. I heard somebody say one time, like, if you're doing it for the money, then you'll end up hating it.
Right.
You'll really end up hating it.
Right. But you got to be smart enough to make sure the money's there.
Right. Yeah.
For sure.
But you have to like
Right.
some facet of it
Right.
to really enjoy it long.
Absolutely. Especially in the sign business. Like I said, I've seen people buy a company and they're not sign guys and they don't really have a passion for it, and it'll eat those guys up.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine.
Because it's such a tricky business. But yeah, absolutely. We love it, and I do. I'm really glad that Bailey got into it. I don't feel like I've forced him into it.
No, not at all.
And I think that he has a real knack
He
for
has
it.
to say that, right? Yeah.
I have a daughter that she's been very, very vocal about never being a part of it. She heard way too much of it over the dinner table.
Right.
But no, it's been good, and I think it's been good for Bailey.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely.
it's been awesome for us.
Bailey, anything to add? Like, if you were going to distill down your experiences to like, here's how you make this thing go, what would you say?
Well, from the experience, I'm still fairly new and everything, but within the sign business, just learn as much as you possibly can and keep at the grind, enjoy the grind. Kind of piggyback off of what my dad said, and
Dave.
Dave /dad. Just enjoy the grind, embrace the suck, and stuff you can make a career out of. So.
Yeah, the opportunity's there if you have the patience and you're willing to do the work for it, for sure.
Yeah.
What's your guys' message to the world?
To the world?
Buy signs.
Buy signs.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I like it. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
nice.
for joining us. That was really actually very, very interesting. And thank you for joining us on the Dragon Slayer podcast by Frontier Credit Union. We'll see you next time.
Woo!